Hi, my name is Taren King. I'm Director of Product for Intuit's SMB MediaLabs, Intuit's new media network. I'm joined here by Liz Caselli, Head of Global Digital and Content at Nestlé. Liz, it's great to meet you.
Thanks so much for having me.
I know you just had a fireside chat, and there were a lot of great topics that you went over. First off, can you share key aspects of Nestlé's digital strategy and how it's evolved over the recent years? I know specifically your CEO has talked a lot about sustainability, which I assume is a key aspect of that. Could you give me a little on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work specifically on kind of the corporate brand and trust building within Nestlé. And I think the digital strategy there has evolved in a couple ways that I'm really delighted about. It's been a long road, I think, to get a little bit of a changed mindset. Yeah. But one big aspect is really thinking about digital as two-way communication. It's not just a platform for us to go out with what we care about. It's really an opportunity to understand what our audiences care about the most, what connects with them, to really listen to them, even when the feedback's not positive, and be able to take that learning and use it as a grounds to have that two-way conversation. And I think that's been a really important evolution of the digital strategy and something that can be a little bit more modern and connect with a consumer that expects more from companies.
Right. Okay, that's great. Regarding sustainability, kind of as like a double click on that, in terms of consumers, is sustainability just a broad range that everyone identifies with? And if not, how do you reach the right consumer that cares about sustainability versus others? Or is that a concern that Nestlé faces?
Yeah, you're so right. I think when you look at like top line data, you'll always get like 80% of younger generations buy for sustainability.
Right.
And I think that misses some of the nuance of what's important to different consumers and what sustainability means to different people. And I think some places we see there's a big focus on fighting and minimizing waste, for instance. We're in 188 countries, so the way that some of these challenges manifest them look really different in Indonesia than in Connecticut or the UK.
Yeah.
And so there are some places where finding the consumers that connect to different aspects of your plan is a huge part of being effective in creating a longer term relationship. So being able to show up with what's connective and meaningful to that individual. They may not care that we have a climate plan that gets us to net zero and emissions do this, and what they really want to know is, how is this affecting the food I buy? How is this affecting my community? How is this making me a player in the world? When I buy your products, am I contributing to something good or something bad? And so being able to make that really customized for each person, I think is a big step that companies have taken towards getting more effective in their sustainability communications.
That's really great and so important in this landscape. You know, there's so many challenges now, obviously, like with AI, sustainability is the big piece you touched upon. In the world of deepfakes and brand trust, how do you maintain that element with the consumer when they're bombarded with so many things, and authenticity is a big piece of this, but on the brand trust side, how is that handled in Nestlé's front?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, and I think rightly so, consumers are getting more and more skeptical of everything that comes out of companies, and that happened way before the real influx of Gen AI in communications and Gen AI as a topic. So I think a lot of it has to do with finding the right balance between what we love as marketers, that's glossy and poppy, and what really takes people to an authentic experience, and being able to spend a day on a farm, or being able to kind of see ingredients at every step along the way, in a way that maybe can get the cleanup, can get a little dynamic touch, but that we're staying away from as glossy as we might go for the products, for instance. So your cup of coffee may be just like an artistic marble and Instagram perfect, but we don't actually really want the Instagram perfect version of the farm. We want to see something that feels like a real farm, that feels like a real farmer. Realistically, farmers are not all wildly media trained, but you can pick that up when you're watching and hearing from folks to get what they're sincerely sharing from their lives and their families. And so I think we check ourselves on that a lot to say, are we kind of having the courage to show the reality, even if that's not always that things are perfect now, some things may be a work in progress. Let's be proud and bold enough to show up with the reality of where things are at, because if we show up with the perfect picture, then it's not going to be credible at all. We'll gain no ground.
Right. It's so important. You touched upon AI a little bit, but I wanted to dive in a little bit more there. In terms of this past year, any notable campaigns you can think of, how important was AI within those in terms of maybe the messaging or the data backing it, and how does that kind of revolve in Nestlé's world?
I think one area that AI has been really important for us, there are a couple different things where I see it having the most potential in the context of our structure. Yeah. One has been around audience targeting and particularly contextual targeting. Like many brands, brand safety is a huge priority for us. We really see ourselves as such a family-friendly brand, and where we show up is really something that means a lot. So having improved targeting on the AI side and having us be able to show up somewhere that's relevant to these challenges, but doesn't represent them in a way that we're not comfortable with, has been something where the improved AI targeting has made a big difference. Working with several of our partners on that, on the contextual side. Also, something that's a reality of how we're structured is we're 300,000 employees around the world. We're in 188 countries. It's hard to wrap your head around, let alone try to manage strategically. Yeah. And so when we talk about who's kind of telling the story of the Nestlé brand, there will never be one answer to that. There's at least one person, often like a small team in every country, who's doing that locally. Yeah. So how do we give them the tools to do it well? And that may be some simple things like creative hygiene and using AI checks on their assets for creative hygiene, so they can create something that's truly local and still be able to validate that it's got those best practice components. So I think one big aspect for us is more tools that can empower local teams to do the best quality work without losing the localness, basically.
Right, gotcha. So you had mentioned brand trust earlier. In terms of any specific campaigns, responsibility, social responsibility in particular, in this age of AI, there are a few that come to mind. I know earlier you were mentioning the Kit Kat campaign, Break for Good, and then as well, are there any other campaigns you'd like to speak about from other brands within Nestlé?
Yeah, so Purina is our pet food brand, and it has one of my favorite examples of all time, more social impact than technical sustainability, but it's one of the best models for me of really choosing something that's relevant and authentic to your brand and then being so consistent and really like showing up on it well. And that's the Purina partnership with the Purple Leash Project, which focuses on helping domestic violence survivors live in pet-friendly spaces and be in a safe place with their pets. Yeah. Pets, I didn't realize before I was working with Purina, pets are actually can be a huge part of the domestic violence equation. Oh. It's actually a reason sometimes that survivors stay, is they're worried about the safety of their pet. And so Purina, now almost a decade ago, started renovating DV shelters to make them pet friendly. Wow. And consulting for DV shelters so that they could bring pets into that space while keeping everybody safe and make sure that it works for the whole group. And they really took that on in every possible facet. So they worked directly with DV organizations, directly with survivors, but they also went and lobbied Congress to change elements of what federal funding for DV shelters could be used for, so that it could be used for things to also support the pets within families. And so they really showed up on that topic so consistently in every space that they were. And it's one of the things that is so connective to pet owners, because I'm also a dog owner, and if I think about a scenario where I wouldn't be able to have my pet with me during a super traumatic time where I'd be worried about her, it's something that you immediately understand and connect with. And so the role that they play as a brand to say, we're going to be part of the solution and we're going to help kind of everybody stand up for survivors together, and something that's really meaningful to them that we believe in, I think was such a strong move as a brand, and something that meant so much to their employees, so much to their partners, and so much to their consumers in a way that we saw have a really strong return.
Very cool. That one resonates with me because I've had pets for so long. It's a big piece of it. So the last thing I want to touch upon is around larger consumer marketing, specifically around executive communication. It's something that is often overlooked, not really really thought about within an organization. But is my understanding correct that that is something that you handle within Nestlé?
Yeah, that's a big part of my role. So I work with our CEO and a few other executives on what does their digital presence and communication look like. And it hasn't historically been a comfort area for Nestlé. It's been something that there was a little bit of fear about getting out there and being in your own voice and not just the corporate suit voice. But once it was something that we really started on, it caught so much momentum because it meant so much to them to be able to really speak for themselves and bring their own perspective. And so I really think that's a massive growing area that, to your point, doesn't always get talked about as part of the broader marketing world. But much like we talk about influencers and creatives, people mostly want to hear from people. And so when you're going out with a corporate message or talking about your brand, it's really important that your leaders can represent that human to human as well.
Very cool. Very cool. In terms of challenges in the coming years and new undertakings, we talked about the communications and having that be a good amount of focus. Any other trends or things in the next few years that Nestlé will be undertaking that is...
That's an interesting one. I think it's not new, but it's always rising. I think companies and brands understanding how to work on like lo-fi content and just show up in a way that's unedited, that's really raw.
Really cool,
I think is one that really helps be thumb stopping in a little bit of a counterintuitive way, because again, people are in their own kind of entertainment space, their own friend space, and it's more meaningful to them to see like the unfiltered version of what's on the inside of a company or brand or product. And so getting more and more comfortable producing for that, I think, is a big area of growth for us that my team's focused on.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.